Okay, so this is going to be rod straightening 101. So here I have a rod that's on a from an old Selmer clarinet, and I did bend the rod slightly just for demonstration here, but I was in the process of fitting this key and thought I would go ahead and shoot this video for you all to see how to straighten a rod. So let's spin this thing. This is in my bench motor, spinning real slow, so y'all can see the wobble. Let's speed it up. You kind of see it moving around there. You can really see it when it's slower. You kind of see that wobbling. So when you're putting something in a bench motor like this, so the bench motor, if it's true, and there's all these different tests you can do to test to see how accurate. And within range that your bench motor is, because you obviously need this to spin to spin true, as well as the bearings, all the stuff that makes up your machine here. So you want everything to be as true as you can, and because of that, when this rod is spinning in here, it's constantly trying to find center. And so that's why you're seeing this wobble. It's because the rod's bent. It's not centered. So handy dandy drumstick with the proper size. You come in here, trying to do this one-handed because I have holding the phone. Come in here, and you bend it while it's spinning. Because it's trying to find center, voila, it straightens. So yeah, I mean, that's as easy as that to straighten in rods. Now the tricky part is getting it to fit inside the hinge tube. A lot of times a hinge tube can be bent, and then you have to do some techniques to actually fix the hinge tube, and you do all that with the rod inserted in the hinge tube. But the main focus of this video, the short video, was just to show how to straighten rods on a clarinet. All right, thank you. Okay, so this is pad installation 101. So this can be pretty brief video, just to kind of give an overview. And due to the lack of equipment for holding my phone while I'm making this video, I'm not going to be able to actually do the installation. But what my plan is just to walk you through what it would look like, and then I will put on the key and kind of show some of those things. Anyway, so the first thing that you want to do when it comes to pad installation is you want to check the fit of the key. So you're going to you'd put the key on there, and you want to make sure that there's no motion on the key. And if you've heard of swedging, that's what swedging is. It's where you're actually removing the play from those keys, and that's a whole different video on how to do that. It's a whole different process, but that is the beginning of like an overhaul, which is what this instrument's in here for. So I'm in the middle of cleaning it, as you can see, and oiling and all that. So you're wanting to check the relationship between that rod and the hinge tube, because if it's loose, what's going to happen is every time this pad is coming down, because it's rotating on that rod, it's going to be, if it's loose, it's going to be unstable like that. So that's a lot of motion, if I'm going like that. But that's just kind of to show you, like, even like at a microscopic level, there's always going to be some play, or this is not going to be able to rotate. So it's not always going to be just 100% perfect, because if it was, this key is going to just be bound up. So and there has to be room for the oil as well. But you can key fit to where you can basically, when you don't have any spring tension, you can make it to where that is not moving basically at all, that you can notice and feel. So, and then you want the key obviously to be free and loose as well, so that when you add oil, it's just nice, it's firm, it's tight, it's doing its job, and it's free, and then of course lubricated with oil. Okay, so that's your first step. So this is a Valentino master pad. It's a synthetic pad, and I buy these in just the right thickness that I like. So basically with this setup, I'm not going to need a ton of glue. And so there's different types of glue. So here is some hot glue that I just kind of cut in little slivers. And this is called George's glue. And so I use George's glue more for, like, say if somebody wanted like leather pads, or I definitely use these on the lower joint pads. And every now and then on some instruments I'll need that for some of the pads on the upper joint, if like I'm needing a little bit more thickness, and you know my pad thickness that I have is not thick enough. But when it comes to pad thickness, like if you're putting this key on there and you're dry fitting is what I call it, where you're putting this pad in there and you're seeing basically with the pad dry in there, you're kind of doing a dry fit, and then you're using what is called a feeler gauge. That's what I use here. And so you're using that to check around the tone hole as it's closing. You know, so imagine this is on here and this is closing with the pad in there. I'm going to be coming in here and checking, you know, first, you know, you can just hit it the whole thing side to side, but then you can even get in here and check many different spots. And you can just kind of come in there and check all the way around, like in different spots. You know, think of it as a clock, you know, maybe 12 o'clock, 3 o'clock, 6 o'clock. You want to check these, you know, corners over here, you know, and while you're doing that is to make sure that you don't have a leak somewhere because the pad is warped, or maybe, you know, a lot of times you'll find that the tone hole itself is warped, and the surface, you know, here is not flat. That can happen just in machining. I mean, we're dealing with, you know, a wooden instrument. That definitely can happen. So that is, you know, basically the process for that. So what I would do, you know, so I have a torch here that I use. It's an acetylene torch. But you know, people use lighters, you know, different heating sources, and the reason why is, you know, certain different lighters and different things will actually can discolor. You know, you just have to polish it out. But the torch I use is pretty good about not doing that. You just have to be careful because it's super hot. So yeah, so what I would do, I would heat the pad cut up, and then I would come in here with my glue, and I would swirl it around. Imagine that's hot, and then you kind of see me doing circular motions in the middle. While that's hot, that would be melting, and I would be building this up. And basically what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to fill in that gap here, because you can kind of see the angle. It's more of like a dome. So I'm trying to make a flat surface. So yeah, I can always put more glue in the center, especially on a buffet. Student models are not always like that. But you put that in there, and you would want, like, if that was nice and flat, then I would have that nice and just secure. You know, there's enough glue in there to hold it in there, and then I'm building it up so there's not any sort of air pockets in there. And another way I can kind of achieve that is while it's still warm. And another thing to consider is not to get it too hot, but while it's still warm, I'll come in here, I'll just stick it in there and I'll rotate it just a couple times. And sometimes I'll even have like a mark of where the sweet spot when I'm dry fitting. I'll make a pencil mark, and I can even kind of put it in crooked originally and say my pencil mark's over here, and I usually put my pencil mark in the back. So what I'll do is I'll rotate it to where that pencil mark is exactly where I had it dry fitting. And then I'm always kind of looking and basically just trying to make it look as uniform as possible. And that way, like, I know the thickness that I want. I've already determined that. I know that it's what I want. And so if it's not correct, like say if I put that on and it's way too heavy in the front, well, then I know there's not enough support in the back. That means it's either not thick enough or this is bent down too much. And so, you know, what you can do is take it off. And if you're not comfortable doing this, then, you know, that's why, you know, techs are here. So I would come in here, and I actually have some different pliers and things where I can actually flex this and bend this to the angle that I want it to be. Especially if I'm dealing with like an instrument that doesn't have a lot of clearance and you know, small tolerances, you know, and all that type of stuff. You are not going to have a lot of space, so you're going to have the pad as thin as it can be. And so that's where you're kind of doing like some angle work. Trying to rotate this. So yeah, so you'd be doing angle work where you're trying to make this look even, you know, parallel to the tone hole as well. So that is for hot glue, and you know, mostly for the Valentino pads. So then the cork pads. So this is a cork pad. I've already sanded it, you know, so I sand these all to fit. So these are all custom fit cork pads. And so I sand the surface, because when you first get a cork pad, if I can grab one in my drawer without knocking my phone off. I don't know if y'all will be able to see this, but you can kind of see there we go, the grain there and just kind of the rigidness of that surface there. So then look, so I've sanded this on some really smooth sandpaper, and it makes it just seal better. It looks better, and that's the same. And so that's, you can see the thickness there. And so I start by sanding these down and get the thickness I want, and then I put a slight bevel with my pumice stone. You know, that's where the bevel comes here. And then yeah, and then so from there, I'm just putting the key on there, you know, with the pad, you know, and that's fit in there. And then I'm testing it, doing that dry fit procedure again, right? And then what I will be looking for, and that's the good thing about cork pads, you know, I can look and say, oh, it's a little, you know, heavy in the back and it's light in the front, but the angle's right. That's what I want. Well, then I can, you know, easily sand this on either on my pumice stone, or I can sand it on my sandpaper again before I glue it in, right? And so the idea of a cork pad is you want this cork pad to be just flat up against that metal on the, you know, on the pad cup. You want it to be nice and flat. And so that way, the same as the master pad, you're going to have more support that way if you custom fit your pads that way. And so then you're just filling in to kind of fill in that gap, but then you just have just enough glue all the way around to hold that pad securely, but all the force is pushed up against that pad cup, you know, on the metal pad cup, and that pad is not going to go anywhere. And so that's the benefit of cork pads, is you can custom fit them. And then also you can kind of come in, I'll come in with a razor blade later, and I can come in and bevel all the way around this surface here. Oops, get that off there. So I can bevel all the way around that. And what that does, when you have a bevel, you know, it's safe. Let me flip this around here. So if the air is coming out of the key here, or the tone hole here, so if it was just a square, you know, edge on the pad, that air is going to come out, and then like the pad is just square, so that the air hits and then kind of goes that way, you know, and it's kind of, a lot of times you'll get like an airy sound here. You hear it a lot like in your G sharp and down here in this section, which is also where you also get a lot of water. So what the bevel does is, instead of just hitting and then kind of going out that way, the air is able to hit and kind of wrap around, because you got that bevel on the edge of the pad. And what that does is it's allowing just more areas, you know, for the air to escape from that tone hole. And so a lot of times that will remove some of the fuzziness of some of these, especially some of these side notes that are typically fuzzy. You know, a lot of times, you know, techs just don't have the pad or the key opening enough. But then a lot of times it's just the fact that it just has a rough edge on the pad. And so, I mean, that's just another benefit of cork. And so one thing that I do for George's glue, to move on to that, like say I was putting in a skin pad or needing to use George's glue. So these you would heat up, and then it actually would kind of melt. And then what I actually do to make my flat surface there, since this is a different type of glue, is I actually let it kind of cool off a little bit. And then I just use my finger, and I'm just kind of pushing it and molding it. And I just basically make it flat, and then with the thickness and the amount of glue that I've determined that I need. And so then it's flat. And so then basically what I'm creating inside of there is just a nice flat disc of glue that is exactly the thickness I want, right? So this would be perfectly flat. The glue would be melted. It would be flat in there, and it would be filling up that hole, and it'd be the exact thickness I want. So then what I come back with, and this is a technique for the, I guess you call this a secret, but for the master pads, you know, they can warp really easy. So, and that's when installing, I should say. They don't warp, you know, when they're on the instrument after they've been installed. But yeah, so you can definitely warp them if you heat them up too much. And so doing it this way, especially on these bigger pads on the lower joint, is that's nice and flat. I'll let it cool off, and then I come back and I just hit the surface of it, of that glue with my torch, just enough to get that surface nice and hot, because I already have my thickness, I already have it attached to the back of the, you know, because I've melted it and attached it to the pad cup. So now I just need to attach the pad, right? And so I'm only heating it up. I'm not going to heat up all that glue. Like, I only need to attach it to that front layer or top layer of that glue. So then I'll heat that up just enough for this to just attach there. And you kind of get used to it. You know how much you need, because if you don't do it enough, obviously that's not going to attach. But then also you got to remember, you're going to be leveling it. And so I kind of think of it in two terms. Like, so when I'm attaching it here. But when I'm doing my pad shifting, I'm only heating the pad surface or the pad cup up enough just to kind of melt the part that's actually attached to the pad cup. And so when I heat that up, when I'm needing to level with my pad slick, which is how you move pads around like this, I'll get it in here. And you don't want to be rocking it like that, you'll warp your pad, but always nice and level. You're just kind of pressing on it while it's warm to the area you want. But back to the to where I'm heating it. So when I'm heating it, I'm only heating this top part. And the reason why I'm not heating it just to melt all the glue is you're going to warp the pad. And I don't need to do that, because if I just melt that top layer inside of there, you can imagine it's inside there. If I only heat that up, that's going to be enough to shift this where I need it to go, because that layer is going to give me that, you know, extra motion there to be able to move that pad where I want it. And I only do that so much. Like if I'm getting a pad and saying it's looking, I mean, this can be extreme, but say it's looking like that, then something's wrong. The key angle is wrong. You know, probably the pad could be too thick. You know, you're looking at a really, you know, low key tolerance there. So in that case, you're going to need to do bending. But sometimes, you know, on some older instruments that, you know, just the way they were manufactured, there's only so much you can do. So sometimes you will have a pad that is a little bit off, but I do my best when I'm installing pads to make them look just nice and uniform, and the thickness that I want them to be. So that's a kind of a brief overview of padding. So yeah, let's do a brief summary then of what you would need. So I use George's glue. There's George's glue. I use little slivers of hot glue. They're just, you know, the glue stick here is what it looks like before I cut it. You can see I use both ends. You know, and yeah, here's the master pads, and then cork pads after I've sanded and beveled, and then here's the stock cork that I use to do that. And then you'll need a good pad slick. So you can get these pretty cheap. And if you want to get real fancy, you can get these at Music Medic. A little shout out to Music Medic. These are outstanding. So these are pad slicks, and they're held, you know, in your hand like that, and you can kind of get in there, and then they're tapered. You know, they're stainless steel. They don't rust. You know, they're machined, you know, perfectly. Yeah, these are great. They feel great in your hand. You can kind of get in there and get more leverage without, you know, rotating it. And so these are really good. You can do that. And then, you know, a lot of people will say a leak light. I'm not a big fan of leak lights. I feel like that really hides a lot of leaks. What really it comes down to is the feel. So this is called a feeler gauge. And this one I actually made it. You know, the one, if you bought this same one, it probably wouldn't have this on here. We just drilled that and put a screwdriver in there. So doing oboes and stuff, you need that. So yeah, so this is just holding this is a 1/2 of an inch feeler gauge. So it's super, super thin. And so I'll come in here and I'm checking all around the pad, like I said. So this is something you definitely need, and this is going to catch those leaks that are hiding when you're just using a leak light. You know, I don't know how many times I'll get instruments that come in, and you know, it's just leaking. You know, like, I just had it repadded, and come to find out, you know, either a leak light or you know, something like that was used. And it's just, you know, really it comes down to using a feeler gauge and just getting that feel right. Like, you want to have a light pressure when you're holding the tool. You don't want to be squeezing it very hard. It's going to give you a false reading. Just very light, you know, all the way around the pad, and let it tell you the truth about your pad installation, you know, because it takes a while to get the feel for it. But once you do, you're gonna be able to tell really quick. And sometimes you can just see, like, if the pad's just got a big gap, you're gonna know. But yeah, the precision work comes down to this tool right here. And I feel like even in factories, a lot of times this is where it's missed. Like, they'll use like little pieces of cigarette paper that they hold with their hands, and they just kind of get it in the ballpark, and that's just not very accurate. So yeah, so that's the basics for pad installation. And yeah, maybe I'll make another video of me actually doing the process. But right now, this is the best I could do with my current video setup. So thanks for watching, and yeah, feel free to reach out to Clarinets by Copeland on Facebook. Follow me there for all my instruments and that I'm selling and repairs. You can reach out to me if you want to schedule something, and just you can also go to my website, betterclarinets.com. Just hope you all have a great day.
Hi everyone, welcome to Melanie's workshop. Today we are going to replace some bumper corks. Bumper corks are not always cork. They can be many different materials, but their purpose is to keep your mechanism quiet and prevent the metal of the keywork from hitting either the body of the instrument or another key. They are also a part of how we regulate the height of the key from the body. I'm going to show you two different methods for replacing these, using a gel superglue and also contact cement. Both are acceptable and widely used among professional techs. So the first thing you're going to have to do is remove any old cork from the key. If it's a peel and stick factory cork, you can just pull it off the way I'm doing here. Otherwise, you can just scrape it off with a razor blade, or usually even just your fingernail. You'll notice there's still some glue residue on the key, and that needs to get cleaned off as well. To do this, you'll take some acetone on a Q-tip and rub off any remaining residue. Nice and clean. Okay, next I like to take a sanding stick or an emery board and gently scratch the area where the new material is going to go. This helps the glue adhere more securely and will give you a more long-lasting bumper. After that, I re-acetone the area just to be on the safe side. You don't want any grease or oils from your hands getting in the way of your glue. Next, you'll grab the material you're going to be using for the new bumper, and this can be a felt or a cork or whatever you've decided to use. So for super gluing a bumper, I like to pre-cut my piece. You want to cut a piece that's a little too large for the area that you need to cover, and then you'll trim the excess afterward. You also want to make sure that you use a really good gel super glue, which is thicker than regular super glue. It has a longer working time and it won't create a big mess. So once your piece is ready to go, I put a few dots of super glue on the area, and then I use my new piece to spread it around evenly before sticking it on and holding it in place for a few seconds while the glue cures. How long you have to hold the piece on there depends on which super glue you end up choosing for the job. Oh, and don't forget to close your super glue bottle so it's not exposed to the air. Okay. Next, I'm going to show you how to apply a bumper using contact cement. The process is mostly the same. We're going to lightly scratch up the key where the new piece will go, and then give it a wipe with acetone again. But this time, instead of pre-cutting my piece, I'm going to apply the contact cement on a small section of the whole felt and wait for it to dry. It's just easier to hold it this way, and also you don't have to worry about losing a tiny pre-cut piece while it's drying. Then I'll apply it to the key and wait for both to completely dry before sticking them together. With contact cement, I never apply directly from the bottle. I prefer to use an applicator, which in my opinion keeps things neater and keeps the contact cement from being unnecessarily exposed to the air. While the contact cement dries, we can come back to our super glued bumper and trim it to make it look nice and pretty. Using a sharp razor blade, you simply cut right around the key, and if you angle the blade in slightly, you can create a beautiful beveled edge. It does take a surprising amount of practice to get really great at making beautiful edges, so don't be discouraged if yours comes out a little raggedy at first. Just clean it up as best you can. Once the contact cement is totally dry, you can cut out your piece, stick it on, and repeat the same process for trimming the edge. Once your bumpers are on the keys and trimmed up, put the key back on the instrument and double check that the key height makes sense. It should clear the body but not be wildly high. If you notice when you play your instrument that that note is now really fuzzy or stuffy, you probably use too thick of a piece. If it's really wild and free or way sharp, you probably use too thin of a piece. In general, try to match the size of what was there previously, and that'll usually give you the right result. And that's bumper corks in a nutshell. Thanks for watching! Hi everyone, welcome to Melanie's workshop. Today we're going to replace a tenon cork by hand. The supplies that you'll need are some 1/16 inch sheet cork. You'll need a 6-inch steel ruler. You will need a razor blade, a pair of scissors, a tenon cork scraper. It'll be sharp and have a scraping edge on one or both sides. Whatever you can get is great. And I like to use a sanding stick with a fine grit. You can use an emery board or just some sandpaper or a file. You'll also need some acetone and a t-shirt kind of rag to remove the excess old glue. So the first thing we're gonna have to do is get that old cork off. You're gonna take your tenon scraper and you're just gonna push the old cork off, and then you're going to, once you have the bulk of it off, you're going to grab your rag and put a little bit of acetone on it, and you're going to rub around on that cork track and try to get all the remaining glue and residue out of those grooves and off of that cork track. That way it's fully clean and degreased for you to continue on to the next step. Sometimes this process is easier than others, so just be patient, keep at it, and get it all clean. Once it's all clean and you have no more glue residue in any of those little grooves, you are ready to go on to the next step, which is cutting your new cork. So grab your cork and give it a bend, check it out, make sure that it's not going to crack. You also want to take note of any big filled spots, and we're going to avoid those in our new piece. And then you're going to grab your ruler and your razor blade, and we're going to cut a straight line at the edge because we're never going to assume that our cork is straight. So save that little package that the razor came in. We're going to use that later. And when you cut, make sure that you hold your razor blade straight. You don't want to hold it to any one side because you're going to then end up with an angled edge instead of a straight one. Now that you have your nice straight edge, we are going to measure the cork track. So you're going to line your cork up, your straight edge up in the track, and then you're going to use that as a guide, and you're going to cut a little notch at the other side. And then you're going to do the same thing to the other side so that you've got a notch on each side. Once you have those two little notches, you can check them out, and you're going to get your ruler and you're going to get it right up against those two notches. And I kind of flip up the edges so that I can really shove my ruler against it so that I know I'm going to cut straight exactly where I want it to. And again, just cut a nice straight edge. And the next thing that we're going to do is cut a little angled section on one side that we're going to use when we wrap. So you just cut a little angle, you can see it there. And then we need to check to make sure that the cork actually fits in the track all the way around. We have to make sure that we did a good job and really cut it straight. Then I like to take the little cardboard piece that the razor blade came in and cut it in half lengthwise. We're going to use this as an applicator for our contact cement. So you're going to get some contact cement onto your new applicator, and then you're going to apply it into the cork track all the way around, a nice thin even layer. Make sure that you get in all the edges and all the grooves. Once that's done, we're going to apply the contact cement onto our cork. And don't forget to put it on that angled edge also. You want to make sure that you have a nice thin even layer, it's not thick and gloopy, and once that's done, we're going to let it dry for a few minutes. Your contact cement will go from looking glossy and wet to like there's almost nothing there at all. You can see that I have a little wet spot here at the end, but we're not going to worry about that because it's going to get cut off anyway. You can also tap it a little bit with the back of your finger, but not too much because you don't want the oils from your hands to interfere with the adhesive. And when you tap it, it shouldn't be sticky at all, and that's how you'll know that it's dry. Next, we're going to line that angled section up with the back of the instrument, and we're going to place the cork gently and straight into the track. And then you want to just press it and kind of pull it around and just make sure it's going straight. And you're just going to pull and press gently until you get all the way around. Once you've gone all the way around, just press it down, and then we're going to use our razor blade to slice off the excess. Then we're going to take our ruler and go around and just press that cork into the groove as much as we can. Around and around, just keep pressing on it and pushing on it so that we know it's really in those grooves. And we're going to really press on that seam and make sure we can get that as flat as possible. Once we've got it pressed in about as much as it'll go, we're going to take our nice sanding stick or your emery board, and we're going to get rid of the bump on the seam. And that's your tenon cork. At this point, you're ready to put some cork grease on it and give it a try. If it's too thick, just take a strip of 320 grit sandpaper and sand it down until the cork fits. Use lots of cork grease, and don't forget the cork will compress over time. Thanks for watching!